In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be talking about the draw against Sassuolo. We'll be previewing next week's match against Torino, Inter Legends, this week's Moratti, Moggi and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Ecco Perisic, 1-1, gioco di gambe, guadagna il fondo, il cross, Icardi, e gol, 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 Maurito il Mamba!
Sono i blocchi nell'area di rigore, arriva la palla, la prende Vecino, che segna solo contro le romane, segna il gol del 3-2
per una vittoria eccezionale.
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima Tavallaey, wishing you all welcome to a new episode of Studio Inter. That maybe this week won't be as happy as last week's episode was. Or at least in terms of how positive Mo and I were going into the Sassuolo game. Both of us were pretty confident, and we got a little slap in the face, didn't we there, Mo?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we got told off properly by Inter.
I was the only one that predicted the match correctly via points, I think.
Yeah, I think you were. Well, that was introduce you our very own Mo laughing in the background was Mohamed Nassar, SempreInter.com's own preview writer, and the guy who got it right is Critty Smith, our own Inter Legends writer. So welcome, guys, and also joining us is the host of the Alex Donno Show, Mr. Alex Donno. How are you?
I'm great. I'm sorry that I missed last week's episode, though, because it sounds like much happier times than we're about to have today.
Well, it was. I don't know if you listened to it or not. But we did have a debate on the Icardi issue. It was quite lively. It was pretty really appreciated. So you're not gonna get away with. Everyone is gonna have their say. So Alex, even though this isn't like school, if you keep your head down, the teacher won't call you. So you'll have to get involved in this debate as well. We'll get into that. But let's start with the game against Sassuolo. Mo and I predicted win. It did not exactly go as predicted. It was a very boring, dreary game. But from Inter's side, but above all, I was really impressed by Sassuolo and De Zerbi, who really outmaneuvered Spalletti. How did you experience this game, Alex?
To me, I thought that there were a lot of failures in midfield. As we often see, Matthias Vecino was quite invisible to me for long stretches of the match. And, you can't criticize this man too much because he's been so superb this season. But I thought it was one of the more lackluster performances that Brozovic has turned in a long time. And I thought that really affected a lot of things. Very thankful that Handanovic made a couple of excellent saves at certain points. He was standing on his head. From the attacking wise, a quiet game by Icardi. He's going to have those. He's had 4 consecutive league matches without scoring at this point. Perisic was pretty poor. I get why he's playing and why he's starting, because Tavallaey is not available at the moment with injury. And then, as I'm sure we will get into, once he came on in the 80th minute, it didn't score, but I thought Lautaro Martinez was actually doing something. He actually provided a spark plug for Inter in attack. And I know it's reaching a point with some frustration as to why Spalletti can't find a way. If he's not going to bring him on sooner in a match, is there any way we can do some more experimenting with 2 forwards? Because to me, it's becoming harder and harder to keep that guy off the pitch, talking about Lautaro, because I think he really is growing into Serie A, and I would like to see him play more. I think he deserves to play more.
We're gonna discuss that the 2-man attack and Spalletti's refusal in a bit. But I'm curious to hear you, Mo. Do you think this is the beginning of Inter's January depression, or is it just another poor game?
Look, I think I'll reserve a judgment about the arc, whether this is symptomatic of what we've seen in the last few years until the Torino game. But what I can say is I definitely agree with what Alex said about the biggest problem, lying in the midfield module, the midfield trio. I think we found there were two types of poor performers in this match. There were players who were invisible, and then there were players who were overly visible but shit. And the players who were invisible were clearly it was João Mario. João Mario was meant to play a pivotal role, and he wasn't asking for the ball enough, and he wasn't there enough, and it kind of seemed like he was lost somewhere there in the final third of the pitch. The other two guys that were always showing up for the ball but did very little good with it were Matias Vecino, like Alex said, and D'Ambrosio. D'Ambrosio had an appalling game. I mean, generally the guy is. I mean, I'm one of those guys that kind of like don't like to wail down on him too much. I think he's decent defensively, and I recognize he's got his deficiencies going forward. But against Sassuolo, he did absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, I think whenever he was on the ball, he was probably the reason why an attack broke down, and we just, so I think the three main culprits were these three guys. They just couldn't tie the play, and inevitably, we know that Brozovic plays well when he's got dynamic guys around him, and the fact that both Vecino and João Mario weren't on, I think, affected Brozovic's output as well. So I'm hoping that it's just post post break for the league blues or whatever, or maybe it's the fact that they're playing in an empty stadium against the bogey team. But I really like I said last week, like I was completely blindsided by this game. I was watching it. My wife was on the couch. She's like, "Why aren't you worked up about this match?" I'm like, "Babe, I think they got this, so I'm not too worried, And then of course, come the 70th minute, I'm pulling out what little hair I have left. So
this is speaking of pulling hairs and that. This is like you and I have never been in disagreement before, and now this is the second week in a row where we profoundly disagree, because I think D'Ambrosio was good. I honestly think this was one of his better games. Or not better games. Let me rephrase that. Let's not exaggerate. I thought he was a decent, solid player. I thought for once, he's always good defensively. We know that. He's a hard worker. There's no discussion there. I thought for once his crosses and his movement going forward was actually really good. For me, the issue I found was Brozovic, exactly like Alex identified. I thought he was not up to the usual standard that we are used to, and I think the reason for this was the way I analyzed it was because of how Vecino, exactly like you said, was completely invisible and completely out of touch. He looked energized. He didn't look as tired as he did at the end of of December, when he looked like he could barely walk because he was so exhausted. But now he looks energized, but he just looked completely lost and out of the game. And João Mario, I agree, I think he was completely invisible. But for me, a person who I really thought was completely invisible and did not, and in my opinion, regressed back from what we saw in December and November and October, especially those 3 months, was Icardi. He was back to his old Icardi again. No movement, no link-up play, none of the stuff that we've seen him do these past few months before the Christmas break, before the New Year, which I thought was the beginning of something really good. None of that. We saw none of this, which made Politano, I think, which in my opinion made Inter's wings really, really predictable, because when he moves in, like when he takes a step forward and links up, then Perisic and Politano can come with speed and take up that place behind him, and that makes us much more dynamic and dangerous. I don't think he didn't do that once. He was once again just rooted into the spot in the penalty area. Now, whether or not that's as you said, if it's a slump in form, or if it's down to, as you said, these guys have been on holiday and are working really hard to build up some stamina, some stamina and pace or whatever. That remains to be seen against Torino. But I really didn't think D'Ambrosio was that poor, to be honest. I really didn't. But Critty, what do you make of it? Why do you think it went like it went?
I'm so pissed off at this match, and I'm so sick and tired. It's like Inter either has the players that have the skill and don't work hard, or they have players who suck but work really hard. we're missing. We still don't have a complete team. We still don't have the players, and there's so little fluidity in this side. It's so splotchy. It's like an 8-bit Nintendo game. It's like pixels all over it's just ugly. It's ugly. It's not smooth. It's not creative. It's Jean Mario has like 2 good matches, then he has a piss poor performance, and then as you said, Icardi. And I think I said this. We'll have to go back a few podcasts. I said temper expectations on this Icardi stuff before the winter break, because Icardi does what Icardi does, and it wasn't necessarily, I don't think, any kind of pattern. I think it just happenstance. Kind of, he just played that way in those particular matches. It wasn't any kind of intelligent design or some Spalletti tactical innovation. It's just Icardi put forth an effort and he was going to try. It's this teams like Juventus, they just get it, like they just get these players that come in, bust their ass, and they're the best skilled players. And you look at this Mercato from last summer. Which of these players is really making an impact? This is the same Inter side as it was last season, minus like Politano. I mean,
that's true.
It's what has Raja Nangolan done? What has Rosalco done? What's Asamoah? He's had some good matches here and there, but largely inconsistent. This is the same team that finished 4th in the league last season. They're struggling again now. They have this match next week. We'll get to it with Torino, which is just has
a nightmare.
A nasty result written all over it.
I'm scared of that game.
But the thing about it is, I'm so tired. It's like it's becoming an annual tradition. Like Christmas is on December 25th, and it's like every beginning of December till the end of January, Inter are going to fall into a massive slump, and it's becoming. It's not even. It's almost like you can't even enjoy the matches because it's in the players' heads, it's in the managers' heads, it's what have you, and it's just becoming miserable to watch. And this is a team. I know I ranted on this in the group chat, but it's like this is a team, Juventus, the champions of Italy. They blow away 3-0, no problem, no questions asked, very little sweat, very little effort. It's automatic. And Inter struggle. And they struggle, and they struggle, and they struggle. And there were chances in this game. They had chances. They had chances to put the ball in the back of the net. But as you said, I think, Nima, you said, Sassuolo had the better chances.
Yeah, I mean in my
Handanovic
opinion,
saved us a number of times.
Absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, I think a little credit has to go also to Sassuolo coach De Zerbi, who I think is the next big thing coaching-wise in Italian football. What I was mostly impressed with was not how yeah, sure, Inter were poor, absolutely, but Sassuolo made them poor as well. And the fact that the way De Zerbi completely blocked Spalletti's way of playing football and forced Inter to kind of play these kind of vertical, the diagonal balls to kind of get some movement. And when D'Ambrosio got it right, Inter were lethal. But then he made some tactical changes and prevented that from happening. So I was mainly impressed. I mean, I think we should give credit to where credit is due. Sassuolo are a good team, and De Zerbi is an excellent coach.
I totally agree with you. But if you're this touted anti-Juve, you are this Inter that's going to challenge for bigger and better things, and you're at home. I don't care if you're in front of kids. I don't care if you're in front of an empty stadium, a full stadium. You're at home. It's your pitch. It's your dressing room. You command it. And, look where Sassuolo is in the table. Look where you are in the table. You should win this match. Whether it's 1-0, 2-0, you should win this match. This is a match you should take the 3 points in. And it's time and time again, Inter squander these opportunities. And these are the matches. This is losing matches like this last season is exactly why it came down to match day 38 when they had to win at Lazio just to get into the Champions League. And, it's becoming an annual tradition. So I can say it's just frustrating to see this happen year in, year out, where they lose their focus, they lose their confidence, and it just everything they've worked for from August until the end of November just goes out the door. They blow leads, they let people catch up to them, and then they have to save themselves the last 2.5 months of the season just to obtain their most basic preseason goals of just qualify top 4, just finish top 4. So it's just watching this type of match every single January is starting to get depressing.
I hear you loud and clear. Alex, do you agree with Critty there? Or do you think maybe that because I mean I think it's really interesting to see what Critty says here, because a lot of people have I mean, it feels like it's two camps. One is definitely on the Critty camp that's saying that this is happening far too many times for us to ignore it. And some say that, okay, this was just one game. This was Sassuolo. They're a bogey team. What do you make of it, Alex?
Well, I will add one thing to what you were saying, Nima. It was such an impressive performance by Sassuolo that it got Kevin Prince Boateng sold to Barcelona about a day later. But I also go back to one of the things, I think it was Mo that brought this up after the introduction. I am going to try and be rational and withhold a meltdown until after I see how Inter perform against Torino. And I only say that because, and I agree with everything Critty said, by the way. So I'm not downplaying that this is a sort of side when you're at home at the San Siro. I don't care if there are 70,000 fans or 11,000 children in the stands who did make a lot of noise, by the way. You have no excuse not to defeat that team in your home stadium. When you are trying to push for second place and you're trying to stay in top four, you need to get better than a draw as a result at home. But the reason why I withhold a meltdown until I see what happens in Torino is only because Sassuolo is a bogey team for Inter. I've had enough misery against that side over the years that if Inter can bounce back and have a positive performance, a bit of a revenge performance, given how they had a very poor result against Torino, at the beginning of the season, second week of the season, when you had a 2-0 lead and then had a dreadful second half for a 2-2 draw. If Inter can show me something this weekend, I can say, okay, maybe Sassuolo is just always a team, especially with a coach now like De Zerbi, that is going to bring out the worst in Inter. I need to see how they can bounce back before I lose my mind completely. I've only half lost my mind.
Well, okay, Mo, have you lost your mind, or are you still positive, Mr. Positivity?
Yeah, no, I think it's a bit. I mean, look, there's a lot. Like Alex said, there's a lot of right in what Critty said. A lot. It is very frustrating. It is, but I always like to provide a different narrative. So I think, one thing that you said, Critty, was the fact that this is essentially the same side, and what have the signings done? I don't think so. I think the team is, consistently better. And again, I could be eating my words in 2 or 3 weeks if we go on a torrid January run. But the way I see it, I think the some reinforcements have largely transformed the team. I agree that someone like Nainggolan and Versalico have been very disappointing insofar as that their fitness hasn't afforded them the ability to show what we know that they can offer to the side. But there's no questioning De Vrij's contribution. Politano, even Keita was on a pretty good run of form towards the end of the season towards the end of the year last year. So I think we maybe are a bit culpable in asking a bit too much of a side that's clearly on the mend. We've all seen what the nightmare that Manchester United have been in over the last 6-7 years, whatever, ever since Alex Ferguson left, and they have infinitely more financial resources to throw at the problem than we do. So I think rebuilding a side, and in Inter's case, it's not even rebuilding a side, it's rebuilding an entire club, the structure, the organization. It's such a difficult process, and I look for silver linings, and I think that the fact that we're clearly in third this year, and we had a bit of a mini meltdown in early December, end of November, and the guys managed to turn it around, leaves a bit more room for optimism. And I agree with you both, or all three of you. The performance against Sassuolo is unacceptable, inexcusable. There's no positive to take away from that game, except for a few things that we'll talk about later in the podcast. But the performance in and of itself, taken, as 90 minutes, was a shit show, and we should always manage to beat these teams, especially at home. So again, in terms of like the larger story, I think I'm hoping that we'll manage to turn it around, and finish the season in a comfortable third position, 6 or 7 points away from fourth, maybe in touching distance from Napoli in second, and that's going to be good progress, So let's see. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I wanted to exactly. Let's move on to the thing that you touched on in the very beginning there, Alex, and that's the part about the two-man attack and how Lautaro Martinez. When Icardi's not moving as much as he was against, which was the case against Sassuolo, then you have someone with Lautaro Martinez who never stops moving, coming, and he looks like he's brimming with confidence. He looks like he's really enjoying life. He's come into things. He's starting to understand what Spalletti wants of him, and he's enjoying his football. And he's benched because Icardi's the captain, and he's the person that everything goes through. Is it time? I mean, the thing is, I've always said that a coach shouldn't change his formation just to suit the narrative. He should play the formation he believes in. But, I mean, with Nainggolan looking so incredibly off as he is, and the midfield looking as off as it is, Spalletti won't dare to play Lautaro as the number 10. Do you think he should play him as the number 10, or do you think he should switch his positions around and play more of a 4-4-2? Alex.
Well, it's hard because they did try to use him as a number 10 all the way back in the opening of the Serie A campaign against Sassuolo, ironically enough, and it clearly Lautaro was not ready. He really wasn't ready for Serie A football yet. So I don't know if Spalletti looks at that and says, okay, I did try this once. I tried this back in late August, and it clearly failed on me. I'm not going to do this again. But I think Martinez is a different player. He's more ready for that opportunity than he was then. As far as changing the formations, I understand what you're saying. The way I look at it, every very good coach has a preferred formation, tried and true. It works for them, and it works for them for a reason. But I also think that every great coach does find a way to adapt to their personnel. And I'm wondering if this is at least worth the experiment of changing the formation to bring two attackers. I also understand that if it does fail, that Spalletti is going to get criticized for that. So it can be a lose-lose situation for him. But I think we've seen great coaches and great managers adapt formations to fit their personnel in the past. And for a team right now that really, sometimes when teams are putting up massive amounts of goals, you say they can't stop scoring. Inter has the opposite problem right now. Even the matches that they were winning right before the winter break, they were 1-0 victories. This is a team that has struggled, as Icardi has struggled to score. The entire squad has struggled to score. I wonder if now it might be worth the experiment of two attackers, because it's not like they can score any fewer goals than they're scoring at the moment. It might be worth the shot if I'm Spalletti.
Okay, Mo, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the writing's on the wall. Sooner or later, Martinez's form or Lautaro's form, whenever he comes on the pitch, it's evident that he's going to force Spalletti to play more and more frequently. And whether it's actually benching Icardi for Lautaro or playing the two of them together, we'll see. But I want to touch on one thing. I think it's difficult to see Spalletti. I forgive Spalletti for not starting the match with both attackers. I think at the starting whistle of the match 0-0, you want to start with your perceived, like Alex said, your perceived preferable strongest formation, and that is Spalletti's 4-2-3-1. So he starts with that, and then around the minute 50, it's clear that something drastic needs to happen. And maybe Spalletti realizes that he has to put Lautaro on. But the problem with putting Lautaro on, it needs to be a two-man sub. He can't just regardless of whoever he takes off the pitch to put Lautaro on, it's going to unbalance the side to such a degree that there needs to be another complementary substitution, as we've seen somewhere in the midfield, like Borja coming on or someone else coming on to be able to cover that additional responsibility of a midfielder that's going to be off the pitch. So I think what was going through Spalletti's mind was, it's clear that I need Lautaro on the field with Icardi, but I can't risk two substitutions, having done already one, and then someone getting injured so early on. So I kind of also understand, like, I don't agree with, like, I think if you're not winning the game, you need to go all out and win and go for all 3 points to win the game and not hedge your bets for a minute 80. But I also understand, or I think I might understand, what his rationale was in delaying the substitution all the way through to the 80th minute. So that's my take on that. But looking to the future, whether we're I feel it's also a bit like the whole Mourinho with United thing. You can't ask. You know what you got with Spalletti. He's a guy who plays with a single striker. You know, that's what he does. He's always done this. And if it's not a straight out striker, then it's a false nine. So he's never played with two strikers. So we can't ask the guy to suddenly not be Spalletti. If you don't want Spalletti, then you don't want Spalletti. But if you want Spalletti, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You know, so that's what I feel about that. I think, like Alex said, he's adapt like to the conditions of the match and to his players to a certain degree, so that he's able to, you know, bring Lautaro onto the field at minute 55, where the guy's going to have, you know, 35 minutes to make an impact on the match, which is, you know, three and a half times longer than the 10 minutes that he had. So I think this is what's needed. What's needed is, you know, more rotation for Lautaro to be able to, you know, present himself as a viable option, a viable threat to Icardi, so that, you know, he puts the fire under Icardi's bum, A, and then B, finding a way to be so tactically flexible as to bring in Lautaro earlier rather than, you know, it's just, I think the idea of him starting is just very far-fetched. But bring him on in the 50th minute, bring him on at halftime, bring him on at the 60th minute, 55th minute. Let's not, like, there's no point in bringing him on in the 80th minute. Nothing's going to change, you know. And then it's just one of those last gasp winners or a Hail Mary, you know, like, and we get a goal and everyone pats themselves on the back, but you didn't solve anything. No. So that's how I feel.
That's Critty, what's your 2 cents?
So literally, you could take the last 5 minutes of what Mo said and just play the record on repeat. You've got what I mean. So I'm going to add a different twist to it. This reminds me of the Paco Alcacer transfer to Borussia Dortmund, and the fact that you have a player who is coming on in the final minutes of the game, and I think he led the Bundesliga at one time in goals and had played like literally 25 minutes of the season. He has scored 9 goals in like, and I don't have the exact numbers. This is not a Borussia Dortmund podcast, so I did not prepare for this, but it was like, in 1 hour of play, he scored like 9 goals. It's ridiculous. And Lautaro, what he does is he provides that kind of spark, not with the amount of goals scored. Obviously, statistically speaking, he's not at 9 goals in 60 minutes or whatever the heck it was. But he provides a different dynamic to the team. And where, you know, eventually Lucien Favre at Dortmund found out, well, hey, maybe it's a good idea to bring Alcacer on maybe in the 60th minute instead of the 82nd minute, and let him have, you know, 25 or 30 minutes to do more damage, to be able to have more scoring opportunities, as opposed to, you know, 10 minutes or right before stoppage time. I think this is the exact same thing as Mo said with Lautaro, is that I would like to see, not necessarily replace Icardi. He's not going to do that. And like this has been said, the 4-4-2, it's a great dream. It's wonderful. I can do that on FIFA. That's I'm the manager of Inter on FIFA. I can do that. But Spalletti does not do that, and Spalletti's not going to do that. It's not his. Mo said it perfectly. If you want the 4-4-2, fine. Sack Spalletti and get someone to do the 4-4-2. If you like Spalletti, then don't expect it. It's you're not, like you said, you're not going to have your cake and eat it too. But I would like to see maybe Icardi, or maybe if he's having one of these games like he had against Sassuolo, maybe Icardi come off the pitch in the 65th minute and let Lautaro have 25 good minutes plus stoppage time to use his movement and his energy to break down the Sassuolo back line and to do some more damage, not just against them, but in other teams, against other clubs. You've seen him and the energy he brings to the pitch when he comes on, and his ability to almost create instant offense and instant attack. And so that can benefit Inter, I believe, over the long term if he has more time to be that dangerous off the bench threat, if you will, and provide them with a spark for more than just the final 5 to 10 minutes of a match.
Well, that remains to be seen, because we do play a game on Sunday, this Sunday away against Torino, against Walter Mazzarri. Remember him, the cranky headmaster who used to run Inter at a point in time. Torino are in a lot of trouble. They're talking about crisi at Torino, etc., etc. Things haven't been working, but this is a team that has. That is really difficult to beat. Torino suffered their first away loss of the season after away last weekend against Roma 3-2 after coming back from 2 goals down, like they did against Inter on match day 2 of the season at the San Siro. So this is a game that I am actually dreading because Torino are a good team. I really rate them. I think they have some quality players. They have a couple of players who always cause Inter problems. Luckily, one of them is no longer with them in Adem Ljajic, but they have Ansaldi, who's looking like the player he was at Genoa when Inter decided to bring him to Inter. But they also have Andrea Belotti, who always causes trouble. They have Falke, who always plays good against Inter. Rincon, and they have Mazzarri, who knows Inter and who will try to really reestablish himself at Torino and try to get them out of this difficult moment by getting a result against Inter. I think Spalletti is too intelligent to fall into Mazzarri's trap, and I think as a result, I think Mazzarri, I think we'll see a pretty much a repeat of what we saw against Sassuolo, a very, very closed Inter. A very tactical game, 2 teams that don't concede that much, and I'm going for the goalless draw. Let's start with you, Alex. What are you expecting? Give me your thoughts and prediction.
I'm with you on a draw, as much as I hate to say it, because I spent a lot of time discussing how I would love to see a bounce back performance to make me forget about what happened against Sassuolo. But yeah, I think, to me, I've reached a point this time of year, especially after how uninspiring Inter just were at the San Siro, that they have to really show me that they're regaining their form before I really believe it. I am expecting kind of a less exciting match like we saw last week, which was a pity because a lot of the Serie A games were lit last week, except Inter Sassuolo was probably the most boring match of the weekend. I expect kind of a repeat of that. I will go for a 1-1 draw in this one. I'm going to say that Belotti is going to probably open the scoring for Torino, and then I am going to expect Icardi to at least regain a little bit of form in the box and get an equalizer in the second half. So, yeah, I don't think that this is the sort of performance that any of us will rave about, but I do think that when it comes down to, potential fighting for position, for third place, and God forbid even fourth place late in the year, you might say thankful to get that point that they got in Torino. So I am expecting 1 point and kind of a similar result as to what happened against Sassuolo.
Mo, this is Mazzarri. Remember him?
Yeah. The bitterest of bitter ex-girlfriends. It's, checking your Instagram profile. Ghosting and like. I can't believe he moved on. Like, oh my God. Yeah.
I love this. Right. So, no, there is no love lost. Mazzarri, I've never really disliked an Inter coach. I really disliked this guy when he was coach of Inter. Because he could suck the energy out of a room just by walking into it. Like
he was comically unlikable. Like he was comically unlikable.
I mean,
He is a caricature of
yeah, he
himself.
really is. He's a caricature. Exactly, he's a caricature of himself. So, what do you think? Like prediction what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's one of those games that's quite difficult to predict. Anything can happen. What we know for sure is that, like Alex said, or I think maybe you had said, Spalletti is a better manager. Yes, you said that, Nima. Spalletti is a better manager, and it's too smart to fall for Mazzarri's tricks. I think our side is a better side than Torino, like man for man across the 11 on the pitch. So I think it's all up to the mindset and the mentality of the Inter players. I think it could easily be a straightforward win for Inter, or it could be an ugly game that's determined by one or two giocate, like Will liked to say earlier on the podcast, like an incident or two. What I think, I'm pretty certain it's going to be an ugly match. Like that's for sure. Like no Mazzarri match is a pretty game, where it's very rare. They're like less frequent or more rare than a blue moon. So I think it's going to be an ugly match for sure. So essentially, I think the match is going to be determined by one of these individual moments. I hope it's Icardi, and I hope it means that Inter scrape a win. But I'm certainly not confident in my prediction.
Nope, I hear you. Critty, last man out. You were far from happy after Sassuolo. Do you think Torino will make you happier?
No, in short. I think so. Torino likes to play a lot of times with like a 3-5-2, so I think it's just going to have a hard time with the outnumbered, not the overpowering or outnumbering of midfield. I think that if you look back to the first match, I think that after the 2-0 lead, that Torino was able to grab a hold of the game, and they were able to control it for the most of, if not all of, the final 45 minutes. And I think that Inter will probably find success against Torino early again. And I think that, again, Torino will adjust to it. I think that perhaps Politano scores a game-opening goal to put the Nerazzurri up 1-0. And I think that Belotti equalizes to make it 1-1 before halftime. And I think that none other, and this is just typical, which should be no one other than Ansaldi that scores the game winner. 2-1, probably in the 89th minute, I would say, as Torino is able to break down once again the Inter back line and get one past Handanovic. I just see this this kind of chess war between Spalletti and I don't even want to say, it just seems like it's not even necessarily tactics or it just seems like it almost seems supernatural how things happen to Inter sometimes in these matches. It almost seems like it's not even something logical that's happening. It just seems like they're in their own heads, or the other team just happens to catch fire for 45 minutes and outperform them. So based on just pure tradition that's happened the last 4 years, and based on the time of season we're in, being that the match is away, being that Torino's last matches include games against Fiorentina and Juventus and Roma. They've had a very tough stretch of games recently, and this is really one they can't afford to lose, especially if they want to stay in the top 10, or they're in 11th place right now. But if they want to continue to have a single-digit placing in the table, this is really a must-win match for them, as maybe they try and claw their way back into the Europa League ranks if they can try and get there. I think this team has a lot of talent, and they do have a lot of good players. Nima, as you said, Belotti being one of them, Falque, Rincon, Silvestre. They have some good players.
Baselli. I really like Baselli.
Baselli, yeah. This is I'm going to go with a 2-1 Torino win, and Inter take home 0 points, 1 point out of 6 to start the second half of the campaign.
Well, let's move on to the part of the show where we walk down memory lane and look back at Inter's glorious history, highlighting one coach, one player, or one coach or one player worthy of being branded Inter legend. So it's time for Inter Legends with Mr. Critty Smith.
non è un personaggio che può essere sostituito, perché era un personaggio assolutamente unico. Il fatto che abbia sempre pensato e avuto nel cuore due colori, il nero e l'azzurro.
All right, guys. So this is nothing but positivity here. This is the part of the show where we get to talk about all of Inter's gold medals and successes, and today's player is a man that is synonymous with all of that, with why this club has the name and the illustrious history that it does. And for the third time in the last 4 podcasts, we're going to go back to the Grande Inter era of Helenio Herrera. And today we're going to be talking about Armando Pichi, the man who was sort of the first guy that caught the eye of Herrera back in the day, and was really the key cog, the piece in the Catenaccio system that Herrera ran back in the 1960 through 68 campaigns at Inter that won them 2 European Cups, 3 Scudetti, and 2 Intercontinental Cups. This is he started out as a right back and was oddly placed there because as soon as he was switched to what we know as the libero, or a sweeper role, which was later also perfected by another Inter legend, Lothar Matthäus, this was the guy who kind of set the trend for what a libero actually is. And so modern football today will tell us that this position is damn near extinct, but it was a position between the goalkeeper and the back 4. So I think of it as a back 5 with someone in the middle between the keeper and the back 4 for those young kids just learning about this this old school football formation here. And he wasn't your traditional defender in the fact that he would just simply go for the clearance. He was instrumental in the buildup of attack. Inter built up a lot of their attacks from the back during the 1960s. Intelligent, able to read the game, had extremely great control over the ball, was a master technician, and was more importantly than anything else, he was an extension of Herrera on the pitch. He was the brainchild of the Inter defense during those Scudetti winning years and those European Cup winning years when they beat not only Benfica to win 1 European Cup, but also Real Madrid, and really cemented themselves as the kings of the continent. Went back to a final in 1967 where they lost, but for 3 out of 4 years, the Inter were in the European Cup final. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Nima, I'll start with you. As far as what Pichi meant to this squad and especially this club's history, I think he's right up there as a top 5 name historically as to and sometimes we forget about the really big names that are 50 years old at this point. When you talk about going all the way back to the 1960s, it's sometimes it's what you've done last, who the last big names are. That obviously we talk about the treble from 2010, but there was a time when Inter were dominant long before then, and it was this group of players that Helenio Herrera brought to the club. And I think that Pichi's as big a name as anyone that Inter's really ever had wear the colors and the crest.
One of my most prized possessions I have is a book called in a book in Italian about Armando Pichi. It's in fact one of the only book that the Pichi family have authorized to be printed about Armando Pichi. It's written by an Italian journalist called Pierluigi Arcidiacono, and it's the foreword to that is written by, or it's not a foreword, it's pretty much just like the introduction, a very brief introduction, written by Massimo Moratti, the former Inter president, whose father, Angelo Moratti, owned the club during La Grande Inter, who won the European Cup, as it was called back then, twice in a row, defeating Real Madrid and Benfica. And he writes, Moratti writes like this: "It's a shame that many Inter fans of today did not have the ability to get to know Armando Pichi, the great captain of Grande Inter. Pichi represented Inter in his profile in the sense of courage, power, and his will, values that remain in the spirit of the squad. Armando is a great player, but above all a great man, a good man, and a point of reference for everyone, both during glorious times as in difficult times. He gave a lot to all of us, and I can affirm that for Inter it was an honor to have a captain like him for always. That pretty much, I think, sums up what Armando Picchi was. Aside from the fact that he was the libero and the central defender, he was the symbol of Inter, in a way that the old Inter, the same way that Zanetti is the symbol of the new Inter.
I don't think you could sum it up any better than that. That foreword right there from that book is picture perfect as far as what describes him and what he meant to the club.
Agree. It's a book. It's written in Italian, but it is absolutely fantastic because the Picchi family opened up their vault and allowed so many pictures never seen before to be published in this book, and it's truly amazing. And I think I've read it 3 times. It is really a fantastic book. No, it's. I mean, he was. I didn't. It's one thing that when you Google and Wikipedia, but when you really read a biography like this and it goes into such detail, you really understand that although the sexy names of Luis Suarez, Mazzola, Mario Corso, Helenio Herrera, all of these people were or Facchetti, the Giacinto Facchetti, but these are the big names, the sexy names, but none of it would have been possible without the captain, Armando Picchi.
Agreed. Mo, did you have something you wanted to add to talk about Picchi?
Well, look, I mean, I'm old, but I'm not old enough to have ever seen La Grande Inter play. But these are names as you guys alluded to, Facchetti, Mazzola. As you learn more and more about Inter, you discover these names, and they reveal themselves to you as part of the glorious history of this club. But for me, Picchi in particular is hits a soft spot because in Egyptian football, till very recently, had always relied on a libero. We call him an Egyptian libero. And I've always been we've always had these really charismatic sweepers as well, and commentators would always refer to Picchi as the quintessential model on which these guys were built. So this is a name that growing up I'd always been familiar with, and when I played football at a very junior level myself as a kid, I'd be either a goalkeeper or I'd like to play as a sweeper. So yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing much more to be said than what you both said, but I just wanted to relay a personal connection to that name somehow across the decades.
Alex, your dad is an Inter fan, and that's why you always said you didn't have a choice to become an Inter fan. Is he of the age that he saw La Grande Inter? Perhaps?
Yes, my father was born in 1950. He grew up on La Grande Inter, and in fact, this one is very, very appropriate because although, like all of us, I wasn't old enough to watch Picchi play, that really was the blueprint for how my father taught me to play football when I was a kid. I was a sweeper up until I think seriously. Well, I think when I got to high school was when I moved to fullback. I moved to the outside, but while the sweeper position was still pretty popular among coaches down here, that was the position my father taught me to play, and Picchi was really the blueprint for that. So this one does hit pretty close to home. As I'll have to ask my father where he ranks Picchi on the list, but I'm sure he's probably one of his 3 or 4 favorites growing up as far as Inter legends go. So this is one that really affected my life directly, even though I didn't watch him play, because whether I knew it or not, I learned how to play football like Picchi. Not to that level, certainly. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on this phone right now. I'd probably be making millions of dollars somewhere else. But this was really the blueprint that I learned to play football playing like Picchi.
Well, thank God for small favors. We're happy that you're with us and not off somewhere making millions of dollars, although I don't begrudge you to make millions of dollars. I'm just happy that you're here.
I think this generation of players, and that's why I've gone back to them here recently, because we're going to get back into the modern era for those the Zanettis are coming, we'll talk a little bit more, maybe a few about the Trapattoni players, and of course we'll talk about more of Mourinho's players from 2010. But this generation of players, from the 1960 through 1970, they were really the first time that Inter gained international status, like as far as like superstardom and notoriety or fame or became a household name. This was a continental powerhouse of a football club, and these players, people can easily forget about the Real Madrid teams, for example, that won those first few European Cups, because there's been so many great Real Madrid teams since then, and Inter's had great teams since then. But these were the guys, this generation of players, Herrera's players, were the guys that really put Inter on the map, and I want to say had sustained success over the course of a decade that really made them a feared team to play. And certainly with the Catenaccio were tactically innovative and really made other managers. It took years before someone actually figured out how to beat it. So that in and of itself is a compliment.
Indeed. Right. Thanks a lot, Critty. That was awesome. I love the Inter. I always like talking about them because I'm fascinated by them. So thanks for that.
Thanks.
Right, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute or to piss out of and make fun of someone or something in the world of football, starting with this week's frog, which will be presented by Mr. Alex Donno.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Oh, I love this one. So the Frosinone owner, Maurizio Stirpe, had an amazing burn at Aurelio De Laurentiis of Napoli. This is just fantastic. So the Napoli president had accused Frosinone of being already relegated when they were promoted to Serie A, as well as not drawing fans, interest, or broadcasters, while urging Serie A to fine them if they finish bottom. And the response from the Frosinone owner: in life and before football, respect is needed, and I didn't see any from him. I've always invested in football, and I built our new stadium with the TV rights money, something De Laurentiis doesn't seem to have done yet. I don't know why he made such an outburst. All I see is a lack of respect from a peasant. I'd also like to say that I won't accept advice from someone who's won practically nothing in recent years. That, my friends, is one of the best frogs I've seen.
Damn. It's like he went to town on him, didn't he? Like he completely went to town on him. Yeah, it was. I laughed so hard when I read this. Damn. Yeah, he should have stayed quiet because De Laurentiis. I mean, what he said was really really rude, because he was saying that because I can't remember exactly the quote, but it was something like, why should these teams? I mean, you shouldn't get money if you get relegated. You should get a fine, because we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be rewarding poor behavior, pretty much, is what he was saying. And he was saying he was talking about, why should they get a piece of the, was it panettone, or what was that Italian bread reference he made, which was absolutely,
yeah, I think it was panettone, yeah.
I mean, I am a sucker for Italian presidents when they get into it and they get at each other. Here's the quote: why should Frosinone have a season in Serie A, be given a slice of the pagnotta, and then be relegated back to the third division? That's what he said. No, I love when Italian football presidents, especially the crazy, colorful ones, get at each other. And today, this really, really made my day. And so I'm just sitting here like rubbing my hands like a child, waiting for De Laurentiis to hit back at this guy. One interesting aspect is that Frosinone were promoted to the Serie A by defeating Palermo in the most unsportsmanlike way ever. So, unfortunately, Palermo president Maurizio Zamparini, my favorite person in the whole world, is no longer owns the club Palermo. But if he did, he would have gotten involved, which would have been even lovelier. But until then, we'll just have to make do with our dear friends Stirpe and De Laurentiis, who are no Zamparinis, but they sure do keep us entertained. Right, let's move on to something a bit more positive. This week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of these qualities.
Yeah, guys, so it's been a pretty bleak podcast all the way through. I kind of alluded to the fact that I think that although the result and the play of the Sassuolo match were pretty abysmal, there's some positivity there. And for me, the one thing that really stood out is the BOO, the Brothers Universally United campaign. That was launched by Inter to basically, after the fiasco of the Koulibaly treatment at the San Siro and the fan ban at home and the closure of the Curva, etc. We've seen Italian clubs react to such controversies earlier, even in the season, with with the most basic and perfunctory of responses. And this is one of those times where, I couldn't be prouder of supporting Inter. Not only has the club, not appealed the ban, and not only has the club admitted error, and they go out and launch this amazing campaign to be able to bring everyone in and remind the fans and remind the world what this club really stands for, and who we are as Inter supporters. Generally a force for honesty and good in a difficult championship. And yeah, I couldn't be prouder. And now I hear that this is just the beginning, and there's a lot more content and engagements and activities planned by the club based off of that Brothers Universally United campaign. So yeah, props to that.
Here. I thought the club really took they really took something really horrible, and also I want the fact that they gave free entrance to kids, 11,000 children. I thought was really, really classy. Talk about taking something really horrible and turning it into something positive. And Stephen Zhang is reportedly one of the people most driving behind this campaign. So really, really well done there. But Inter have done absolutely everything they can do. And I'm no fan of the Curva Nord and their right-wing fascist political stance. So I'm all for giving the children the Curva Nord from now on, and give them 11,000 free tickets every game, because they made just as much noise and didn't give any of the headache. So that's my 2 cents on that. Right, let's move on to something slightly more negative. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by myself. It was for me the Moggi of the week is kind of what was this is something that was decided last week, which Will said last week, but watching it on TV yesterday unfold, it was ridiculous. Genoa Milan was played on Monday at 3 p.m. CET local time. Because of the fact that this is a high risk game, and this was such a bizarre match because it was. I mean, the fans were boycotting this game because they were not happy about this at all. They thought it was absolutely ridiculous that because of the fact that this was a high risk game, let's move it to 3 p.m. on a Monday so that no one can come. So everyone boycotted the game, and it was a weird game. And I think Prandelli said it best when he said afterwards that this is not football. This is not normal, and this should not be normalized. And I couldn't agree more. This Italian way of handling things, of just sweeping it under the rug and pretend that everything is okay, they've done it they've turned it into an art form. But this can't go on, because the decision to avoid clashes between fans by playing it on 3 p.m. on a Monday is just so strange and weird, because this logic that if no one can go, no one can fight is just absurd. For me, that the decision to handle situations without actually resolving them is for me this week's Moggi. Right, that was all we had time for this week. I'd like to thank Alex, Donno, and Critty Smith, who had to run away sooner. Thanks to you guys for coming on, and I'd also like to thank Mr. Positivity himself, Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Thanks. Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you for listening to us.
Shout out to Hungry Nasaurus. I really like your food blog. I can really. What is the address? I've been talking about it so much. So how do people go on there? What's the URL?
So I mostly Instagram now. I don't blog as often, but I'm a Hungry Nasaurus on Instagram.
Yeah,
Nasaurus is NASSAURUS. Nasaurus.
Yeah. No, I did one of your recipes. I can't remember which one. It was a long time ago. But I think it was a risotto I did. It was kick-ass. So great recipe. I can really.
Thanks for that, man. Always good to hear. And thanks. Thanks for the plug.
Until next time, until next week, I'm your host Nima Tavallaey, wishing you a good weekend, 3 points, and as always, sempre e solo Forza Inter.